Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Stella Gray here. Today I'm going to be talking about a timeline of paranormal events that happened to me and to my family over a very long time. It pretty much went on my entire life, but in small increments. Like, it started out when I was 4 years old, living in the southern part of the U.S. My mom got married. Well, she was never married to my father, so she didn't get remarried. She got married, and we moved into a house where, come to find out, a boy had killed himself. He shot himself in the head at the young age of 18. We didn't know this until we moved out. We didn't know that he killed himself. No one told us that before we moved in or anything. And like I said, I was only 4 years old at the time. So I remember the events that happened. I just don't remember everything from that age, but I do remember being haunted by this boy. Every night, if I slept in my bedroom, he would rip the covers off of me, rip my Little Mermaid sheets off of me. He would wake me up. I had reoccurring nightmares about things that happened to him throughout his childhood. I remember dreaming about his father chasing him down the hallway. And I would see, like, in the dreams, I saw shadows on the walls. I remember his dad. I had, like, small visions of his family. And it always occurred at night, usually around between 1 and 3 o'clock in the morning. And one of the visions I had, I remember that his dad always had a red plaid jacket on. And his dad was an alcoholic. From what I saw, I believe that he beat the boy, and maybe that's why maybe that's why he killed himself at 18. So I constantly dealt with this until we moved out of the house. We moved out of the house, and we just moved a little ways up north. We're still in the southern part of the U.S., but we moved a little ways up north in that state. And I didn't have any more experiences with this boy after we moved out until later, which we will get into that later in this video. But we ended up, after we moved, years went by, and then I met my now husband. And I'm going to tell you guys, I'm going to be straight up and honest. I was a rebellious teenager, and I left home at a very young age. I left home at 18 and became pregnant shortly after with my son, who is 10 years old now. So we ended up, I ended up meeting my now husband, and we've been together ever since, except for a small portion in our lives when we weren't together. We actually split up for about 2 years, but now we're currently back together and plan to keep it that way. But after I met him, we ended up moving in with some friends of his, and the boy that we lived with, we're just going to call him Todd. He's the owner of the house that we resided in. So I remember Todd told me at one point, if you ever see him, don't be afraid of him. Just ignore him and he'll go away. Well, I honestly thought he was just full of it. I didn't believe him despite what I had seen when I was younger. I didn't feel much of a presence at first in that house. So I just kind of swept it up under the rug. And then one night, we were asleep in our room in Todd's house, and I remember something woke me up out of a dead sleep, and I rolled over and I looked to my right. I looked to the right, and here's our room, and then here's the kitchen. And in the kitchen, there's a circular dining room table. Okay? Well, when I looked to my right, towards the dining room table, I saw a shadow figure with a hat on. And it looked like he was wearing a big jacket. But like I said, this is a shadow figure. It's all black. I don't see facial features. Couldn't see facial features or anything like that. Well, I looked at him, and he was sitting like this, holding his hat, and then he slowly turned and looked at me. I couldn't see his face, but like I said, I could feel his presence like crazy, and it was not a good presence. I woke Phreak up. Phreak is my husband. I woke him up, and I didn't even have to say what, I didn't even tell him what I saw. He looked up and immediately saw it himself. And I remember he yelled out to the thing. He said, "What do you want?" And then there was no answer, but we could still feel his presence, and he was staring. We could feel him staring at us, this thing, this black shadow figure. No answer. And then Phreak told me, "Why don't you just turn around and go back to sleep and ignore it?" And I was like, how am I supposed to ignore it? And then right after he said that, I looked back over at the shadow figure, and this thing, I'm not even kidding you, got up and walked out. It sounds silly, but he got up and walked out. It was the scariest thing. The next day we woke up, we talked about it like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that happened. We told Todd about it. Todd was like, I told you if you see him, just to ignore him. So then we didn't see anything else after that, but there was constantly an eerie feeling in that house. And right after that happened, everyone in that house started fighting. We fought about everything. Everything. And it got so bad to the point that we had to leave that house. Todd wanted everyone that was in that house to leave. So we left, and we didn't have a whole lot of money. Like I said, guys, you know, we were really young. We were like 18 years old, or 18 and 19 years old. I was 18 and Phreak was 19. So we left that house. We basically hotel hopped for a while, and then we ended up getting our own place. We finally got our own place. So Phreak and I, we moved into our own little, it was a little house. So we moved into that. And when you walked into the house, here's the door, and here's a long hallway. The living room's right here. Here's the door, and here's a long hallway. Well, Phreak was at work. I was actually moving stuff into the house that day. So we didn't have a lot of stuff, guys. So I was moving in the little bit of stuff that we had. But before I moved the stuff in, I actually had to clean the place because we got a really, really big deal on the place. It was only like $400 a month. It was super cheap. And it's really all we could afford. And we had to have a place to go. We couldn't just hotel hop forever. So we moved into this place. I'm moving our little bit of stuff in, and as I'm moving in, like I said, Phreak is at work. I'm by myself, but it is broad daylight outside. The same thing that I saw at Todd's house took one big, huge step out of the room that's at the end of that long hallway out of the room and stared at me. Again, I could not see his face, but I could feel his presence. I could tell he is a male, and I could tell he's definitely evil, okay? I could feel his evil presence, and he's just staring at me, and I can feel him smiling, this evil smile at me. So what do you think I did? I left. I went out. I got out of that house, and I did not go back into that house until Phreak got home. I told him what happened, and once again, he said the same thing that Todd said. Just ignore it. Let it go. You know. So, that's what I did. I ignored it. And then come to find out, I was pregnant too. So that added on to my stress level. I was pregnant at the time with our now 10-year-old son. So, once again, day in, day out, I felt this presence. Didn't know what to do about it. You know, I made friends with the girl that lived up the road. I made friends with her. And she actually brought it to my attention that the woman that lived in the little house that we're renting, that lived there, well, that we were renting, she was a witch. She kept, and in the room that I saw this black shadow figure take this huge step out of previously, in that very same room, the previous occupant, she had voodoo dolls in the closet in this big suitcase that we didn't even know were in there. We didn't even know they were in there. Because like I said, we got this huge deal on this place, and I had to clean this place up before we could move into it. But the room with the voodoo dolls, I never cleaned that room. That room actually belonged to the witch's children when she lived there. She still had kid stuff in there that I still had to get rid of. Okay? So we found all of these voodoo dolls. We didn't know what to do. We were just like, oh my gosh. But that still didn't explain why I saw the same thing that I saw at Todd's house in this new house. It's absolutely insane. And I knew that this was the same presence that I saw at Todd's house. I just had that feeling. I just knew it. Days and days go by, and like I said, the eerie presence is just everywhere. I even remember one night being raped by this thing. I was raped. Phreak woke me up. Why are you flailing around? And then I was like, I told him about this nightmare, and I could feel everything, and all of this happened. I was already pregnant, and I was raped while I was pregnant. All of this stuff, this was the most horrifying time in my life. I didn't know what to do. I knew people were going to think if I talked about it, I was crazy. That's why anyone going through this, you need to seek some type of help. It was absolutely insane. And I remember waking up, and it was freezing in our room. The AC, somebody kept cutting the AC down to 0. And, well, it was freezing. We were just like, why is it so cold? It just felt... And I remember our TV would go on and off at different times. It would just go on and off, on and off. And we were just like, what do we do? You know? We didn't know how to handle this type of situation. So we eventually, of course, we moved out of this house too. And the time went by, didn't experience anything, but the entire family was still fighting all the time. It's like the dark presence just followed us. Now I'm going to wrap this up, guys, and I'll be right back with part 2.